Chaparsiu, the shadows behind your eyes. Clara was the type of person who lived life on the edge of constant burnout. She worked a high-pressure job as a project manager for a tech company, and her bosses were relentless in their demands. Her days were filled with back-to-back meetings, emails, and impossible deadlines. Her nights were restless. She would toss and turn, unable to shut off her mind. "You need to relax," her friend Sophie insisted one evening over drinks. "I've been using this meditation app and it works wonders. It helps you shut off everything. You'll sleep like a baby." Clara laughed it off. "I'm not sure some app can fix what's going on in my brain, but I'll try anything at this point." The next evening, after another 14-hour workday, Clara collapsed onto her bed, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her mind still racing. She couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished tasks, and her anxiety loomed like a dark cloud. She pulled out her phone and searched for the app Sophie had recommended, Serenity Now. The app opened with a soft chime, and a calming voice introduced the meditation session. "Welcome to Serenity Now. Tonight we will guide you into a deep state of relaxation. Let go of the world, let go of your stress, and drift away into peace." Clara sighed, lying back on her pillow, adjusting her headphones. "Here goes nothing," she muttered, as the voice continued to guide her through breathing exercises. "Inhale deeply and exhale. As you breathe out, let go of the tension in your body." The voice was soothing, almost hypnotic. Clara felt her muscles slowly unclenching, her breath evening out. Her eyelids grew heavy. "Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself in a place where you feel safe, a peaceful place where nothing can disturb you." Clara's mind wandered to an image of a secluded beach. The waves gently lapped against the shore, and a soft breeze played with her hair. She could almost smell the salt in the air. It was so real, so vivid. Her body felt light, weightless, as if the stresses of the day were melting away. "Keep your eyes closed. Relax. You are safe here," the voice in the app whispered. Clara's body sank deeper into the mattress, her mind drifting further. She felt the tension that had knotted her muscles for weeks begin to dissolve. The soft voice continued to guide her deeper into this meditative state, but soon, something strange began to happen. The beach, which had been bright and peaceful, started to change. The sky grew darker, and the once pleasant breeze turned cold. The waves, gentle moments before, became rough, crashing violently against the shore. Clara tried to shift her mental image back to calm waters, but the scene spiraled out of her control. "Keep your eyes closed," the voice said again, but this time it didn't sound as soothing. There was a slight edge to it, almost like a command. A shiver ran down Clara's spine. She tried to open her eyes to stop the meditation, but her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. Panic started to creep in. "Keep your eyes closed. Relax," the voice repeated, firmer this time. "You're safe." But Clara didn't feel safe. The darkness in her mind thickened, and the crashing waves grew deafening. She could feel her pulse racing, her breath quickening, but she couldn't move. The app's voice kept urging her deeper. "Let go. Drift further into the darkness." And then she heard it. Something else. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't the voice from the app. It was something else coming from the depths of the blackness in her mind. "We see you," it hissed. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes were glued shut, her body paralyzed. She strained to open her eyes, to pull herself out of the meditation, but her limbs felt frozen in place. "You're not alone." The whisper came again, this time closer, as if someone was standing right next to her bed. Clara wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She was trapped, her body unresponsive as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They were everywhere, swirling around her, filling the air with a menacing hum. "You belong to us." Suddenly, she felt a pressure on her chest, a heavy weight pinning her down. She couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded as terror took hold. Something cold and slimy brushed against her arm, as though invisible hands were reaching out from the darkness. "No!" Clara tried to scream, but her lips wouldn't part. She was locked in her own body, fully conscious but unable to move. The weight pressed harder, and she felt as if she were being pulled into a bottomless pit. The whispers became a chorus of voices echoing in her ears. "Don't open your eyes. Don't wake up." Clara fought with all her strength, struggling to break free. She could feel her muscles twitching, her fingers trying to move. Finally, with one last burst of effort, she ripped her eyes open. The room was quiet, the soft glow of her bedside lamp casting shadows on the walls. She sat up, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her entire body trembled. It took her several moments to realize she was awake, truly awake. She ripped the headphones off, throwing her phone to the side. The app had shut off, the session long finished. But something wasn't right. The air in the room felt different, heavier. She looked around, scanning the dim corners, half expecting to see something lurking there. But the room was empty. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The whispers were gone, but the memory of them lingered in her mind. And then she noticed it, the faintest flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. She turned her head, but nothing was there. Clara stood up on shaky legs, moving to the window to let in some fresh air. She needed to clear her head, shake off the remnants of that horrible dream. But as she approached the window, she froze. In the reflection of the glass, just behind her, was a shadow. A figure, tall and formless, standing in the corner of the room. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but it was there, unmistakable. Clara whipped around, but the corner was empty. Her heart raced, her skin crawling with fear. She looked back at the window, at the reflection. The shadow was still there, still watching her. She stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp in her panic. The room was bathed in darkness, and in that moment, she heard it again. The whispers. "Close your eyes. Relax. We're waiting for you." And as the shadows closed in, Clara knew one thing for certain. She should have never opened that app. The sound of silence. The therapist's office was cool, quiet, and minimalistic. Clean lines, soft tones, and a few scattered plants created a calm atmosphere, exactly what Emily needed. She had always struggled with anxiety, and after months of sleepless nights and panic attacks, she finally decided to see someone about it. Dr. Hill, the therapist, was a gentle man with a soothing voice. He specialized in sleep therapy and guided relaxation techniques. On her first visit, he recommended a special exercise that would help Emily release her tension and fall into a deep, peaceful sleep. "Close your eyes, Emily," Dr. Hill said softly, "and focus on your breathing. I'm going to guide you through this, and all you need to do is relax." Emily hesitated at first. She wasn't used to being vulnerable, even in a safe space. But she was desperate for sleep, for relief from the constant knot in her stomach and the heavy weight pressing on her chest. So she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let her mind drift as Dr. Hill spoke. "Imagine yourself in a quiet, peaceful room," he began. "A place where you feel completely safe. The air is still, the world outside is far away. You're here, and only here." Emily followed his voice, visualizing a dark, quiet room. No windows, no doors, just a place where nothing could bother her. As she breathed in the stillness, she could feel her body relaxing, sinking deeper into the chair. "Now," Dr. Hill continued, "I'm going to count backward from 10. With each number, you will fall deeper into relaxation. By the time I reach 1, you'll be in the deepest state of calm you've ever felt." Emily's heartbeat slowed. She could feel the tension draining from her body, her muscles loosening. It felt good, better than she'd felt in months. 10, 9, 8. With each number, she felt herself sinking further into the quiet darkness behind her eyes. It was like falling asleep, but still being aware of every sensation in her body. Every breath felt slower, deeper. 7, 6. A strange thing began to happen. In the silence of the room, with her eyes closed, she became acutely aware of sounds she hadn't noticed before. The gentle hum of the building's ventilation system, the creak of the chair as she adjusted her weight. But there was something else, too. A faint, rhythmic tapping sound. At first, she thought it was just the clock on Dr. Hill's desk, ticking away the seconds. But the more she focused on it, the less it sounded like a clock. It was slower, more deliberate, like someone tapping their fingers against a surface. Tap, tap, tap. 5.4. The tapping was getting louder, more persistent. Emily shifted in her chair, trying to ignore it, to stay in the relaxation Dr. Hill was guiding her into, but it wouldn't stop. The noise was rhythmic, almost as if it were keeping time with her heartbeat. 3, 2. The tapping grew louder, clearer. It wasn't coming from the room, it was inside her head. Her pulse quickened, the calm she had felt moments ago beginning to slip away. 1. Dr. Hill's voice faded into the background as the tapping grew deafening. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest now, and with every beat, the tapping grew sharper, faster, almost frantic. She tried to open her eyes to break free of the exercise, but her eyelids were heavy, stuck. Panic set in. She wanted to scream, but her throat was dry, her voice gone. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was maddening, echoing in her skull, relentless. And then she heard something else. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A voice, whispering, low and distant, just beneath the tapping. She couldn't make out what it was saying, but the sound made her blood run cold. It wasn't Dr. Hill's voice. It was something darker, something sinister. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. For a moment, the room was silent again, and Emily felt the panic beginning to subside. She took a deep breath, focusing on calming herself, on listening for Dr. Hill's soothing voice to bring her back. But the silence didn't last long. Out of the stillness, a new sound emerged. Soft at first, but growing louder, closer. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, as though someone were walking toward her, inching closer with each step. Emily's heart raced. She knew she was alone in the room with Dr. Hill, but the footsteps were unmistakable, growing louder with every second. They stopped right next to her chair. Emily's entire body tensed. She wanted to open her eyes, to snap out of this, but her eyelids wouldn't budge. She was trapped in the dark, frozen with fear. She could feel someone, or something, standing right beside her, close enough to touch her. And then she heard it. The voice. Louder this time, clearer, whispering right into her ear. We've been waiting for you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The voice was wrong, unnatural. It didn't sound like a person. It was low, guttural, a rasping noise that sent chills down her spine. She felt something cold brush against her arm, like fingers tracing her skin. She jerked, trying to break free, but her body wouldn't respond. "Open your eyes, Emily," the voice whispered. "Open your eyes." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct told her not to listen, not to open her eyes. But the voice was persistent, coaxing her, teasing her. "Open your eyes. Let us in." Her eyelids fluttered heavy and sluggish, but she couldn't stop them. Slowly, they began to lift. The room was dark, too dark. The soft lighting that had once filled the office was gone. In its place was an unnatural blackness, thick and suffocating. And in that blackness, standing right beside her, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Its face was hidden in shadow, but its eyes, two glowing white orbs, pierced the darkness, staring directly at her. Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure leaned in closer, its cold breath brushing against her skin. "We've been waiting for you, Emily," it whispered again, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. She felt its fingers, icy and sharp, curl around her wrist, pulling her deeper into the darkness. The last thing she heard before the world went black was the faint sound of Dr. Hill's voice, distant and far away. "Now open your eyes and relax." Done be offline forever. Max was a self-proclaimed tech junkie, constantly seeking out the latest gadgets, apps, and online experiences. So when Lucid Dream, the world's first fully immersive virtual reality game, was released, he didn't hesitate to purchase the top-tier headset. It was advertised as a revolution in gaming, so real, so detailed, that you could lose yourself for hours in its beautifully crafted worlds. The key feature that attracted Max wasn't just the stunning graphics or the endless landscapes to explore. It was the dream mode. This unique mode promised to blend gameplay with your subconscious, merging your dreams with the virtual world. All you had to do was wear the headset while you slept, and the game would use your dreams to create a personalized adventure. It sounded too good to be true, and maybe it was. The first few nights were incredible. Max found himself wandering through fantastical landscapes, meeting characters crafted from his own imagination. Each adventure was unique, tailored by his subconscious mind. One night he battled monsters in a haunted forest, and the next he was flying over vast futuristic cities. Everything felt real, yet dreamlike. A perfect balance between fantasy and reality. But after a week of using dream mode, strange things started happening. One night, Max found himself in a cold, empty room, much different from the vibrant worlds he had experienced before. The walls were bare, and the only light came from a single flickering bulb overhead. Confused, he tried to exit the game, but the usual menu didn't appear. He was trapped in this room, alone. "Must be a glitch," Max muttered, trying to stay calm. He removed the headset, or at least he thought he did. The room didn't disappear. He was still standing in the same cold, lifeless space. Panic began to set in. He reached up to touch the headset, but his hands passed through thin air. There was nothing on his head, nothing to remove. Max's heart raced. He tried blinking, shaking his head, anything to wake up from the dream. But the room remained the same. The flickering bulb buzzed above him, and the shadows seemed to shift, closing in on him from all sides. This isn't real, he thought. It's just a dream. But it felt real. The cold air biting at his skin, the faint smell of mildew in the room, even the rough texture of the concrete floor beneath his feet. Everything was too vivid to be a dream. Then, a sound. A faint shuffling, like footsteps echoing from somewhere in the distance. Max turned around, but the room was still empty. The sound grew louder, closer. It wasn't just footsteps now. There was breathing, too. Heavy, raspy breathing, as though someone, or something, was just beyond the edge of the light. "Who's there?" Max called out, his voice trembling. The footsteps stopped. The breathing grew louder. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging Max into complete darkness. He fumbled in the blackness, his pulse racing, trying to find the walls, the floor, anything to ground himself. But it was as if the room had disappeared altogether. There was nothing around him now, just an endless void. And then he felt it, a cold, clammy hand brushing against his arm. Max recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. He stumbled backward, desperate to escape whatever had touched him. But the hand grabbed hold of his wrist, yanking him back into the darkness. He could feel its icy grip tightening, pulling him deeper into the void. "This isn't real," Max screamed in his mind, but his body wouldn't respond. His legs felt like they were sinking into the ground, his arms heavy and useless. In the distance, he could see a faint glow, a doorway, barely visible in the darkness. With every ounce of strength left in him, Max broke free from the hand's grip and sprinted toward the light. The closer he got, the brighter it became, until finally he burst through the doorway into another room. This one was different, brighter, warmer, with soft, flickering candlelight and the faint smell of incense. But something was still wrong. The room was filled with people, dozens of them, standing perfectly still, all staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Their faces were blank, their expressions frozen in eerie, unnatural smiles. Max backed away, his heart pounding. These weren't people. They couldn't be. They looked like wax figures, their skin pale and smooth, their eyes vacant, lifeless. As he turned to leave, he noticed something even more disturbing. Each of them wore a headset, just like his. And in each of their hands they held a small device, glowing with a faint, eerie blue light. Suddenly, one of the figures moved. A woman standing closest to him tilted her head ever so slightly and smiled wider. Her eyes locked onto his. "Join us," she whispered, her voice mechanical, distorted. Max's blood ran cold. He looked around at the other figures, their eyes now following his every movement. "Join us," they all whispered in unison. Panic surged through him. He tried to pull the headset off again, but it was still gone. There was nothing to remove. His hands scrambled over his head, clawing at nothing. He was trapped. The figures began to move, slowly stepping toward him, their hands outstretched. "Join us. You'll never have to leave." Max turned and ran, his feet pounding against the floor as the figures followed, their whispering voices filling the air. He reached for the door, flung it open, and sprinted through it, only to find himself in the same cold, empty room where he had started. The flickering bulb buzzed overhead, casting shadows that danced along the walls. This can't be real, Max thought. This can't be happening. But it was. The figures were closing in, their voices louder now, almost a chant. "Join us! Join us!" Max screamed, but no sound came out. The cold, clammy hands wrapped around his wrists, his legs, pulling him down to the floor. He struggled, kicking and thrashing, but it was no use. As the world around him dissolved into blackness, the last thing he heard was the soft, mechanical voice from the game. "Welcome to dream mode. You'll be here forever." In the depths of the countryside, where the darkness holds sway and the silence is broken only by the whispers of the night wind, lies Midnight Road, a stretch of asphalt shrouded in mystery and fear. Legend has it that Midnight Road is cursed, a place where the veil between the living and the dead grows thin, and the spirits of the past roam free. Tales of ghostly encounters and unexplained phenomena have made this desolate highway a place of dread, where even the bravest travelers fear to tread. It was on a moonless night, with the stars hidden behind a blanket of thick clouds, that I found myself driving along the infamous Midnight Road. The road stretched out before me like a dark ribbon, disappearing into the depths of the forest that lined its edges. As I drove, a sense of unease settled over me, a feeling that I was not alone on this lonely stretch of road. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and strange noises echoed through the darkness, sending shivers down my spine. Suddenly, the headlights of my car illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road, a spectral apparition bathed in an eerie blue light. My heart pounded in my chest as I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a halt just inches from the ghostly form. But as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving me alone on the deserted highway. Trembling, I climbed out of my car and peered into the darkness, searching for any sign of the mysterious presence that had crossed my path. As I stood there, the silence of the night was shattered by the sound of distant footsteps, a slow, steady rhythm that seemed to draw closer with each passing moment. Panic gripped me as I realized that I was not alone on Midnight Road, and that whatever lurked in the shadows was coming for me. With trembling hands, I fumbled for the keys to my car, desperate to escape the looming threat that haunted the night. But as I turned to flee, a cold hand closed around my wrist, its touch like ice against my skin. I froze in terror as a voice whispered in my ear. A voice from beyond the grave, filled with sorrow and longing. "Beware the darkness," it murmured, its words sending a chill down my spine. "For once you enter, there is no escape." With a cry of fear, I wrenched myself free from the ghostly grip and sprinted back to my car, my heart racing with terror. Ignoring the pounding in my chest, I slammed the door shut and peeled out onto Midnight Road, leaving behind the horrors of the night far behind me. But as I drove, the memory of that fateful encounter burned brightly in my mind, refusing to be ignored. I could still feel the icy grip of the ghostly hand on my wrist, hear the whispered warnings echoing in my ears. And though I tried to convince myself that it had all been a trick of the imagination, a part of me knew that Midnight Road held secrets far darker than I could ever imagine. As the miles stretched on, the darkness seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with its weight. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and strange noises echoed through the night, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that gripped me, to focus on the road ahead and put the horrors of Midnight Road behind me. But no matter how hard I tried, I could not escape the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the night wore on, I began to feel the first stirrings of exhaustion creeping over me. My eyelids grew heavy, and my thoughts became muddled with fatigue. I knew that I needed to find a place to rest, to escape the darkness that threatened to consume me. But as I scanned the desolate landscape for a sign of civilization, I realized with a sinking feeling that there was no escape from Midnight Road. The forest stretched out on either side of the highway, its depths shrouded in darkness and mystery. With a sense of resignation, I continued to drive, the miles ticking by in a blur of darkness and despair. I tried to push aside the fear that gnawed at my insides, to focus on the task at hand and keep moving forward. But as the night wore on, my resolve began to waver, and the shadows seemed to grow darker with each passing moment. I could feel the presence of something sinister lurking just beyond the edge of my vision, its malevolent gaze fixed upon me with unblinking intensity. With a sense of growing dread, I realized that I was not alone on Midnight Road, that something far more sinister than I could ever imagine was hunting me, its hunger for my soul driving it ever closer with each passing moment. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, I knew that I had to find a way to escape Midnight Road, to break free from its suffocating grip before it was too late. With every ounce of strength that remained within me, I pushed my foot down on the accelerator and sped into the growing light, praying that I would find salvation before the darkness consumed me whole. And though I may have escaped with my life, I knew that the horrors of Midnight Road would haunt me forevermore, a shadow that would follow me wherever I went. For in the heart of the darkness, where the spirits of the past roam free and the veil between the living and the dead grows thin, there can be no escape from the horrors that lurk within. The night was thick with darkness, as I found myself in the role of the designated driver among my group of friends, Michael, Eddie, and Daniela. Living in the remote countryside meant our journeys to bars or parties involved traversing long, winding roads devoid of streetlights, save for the occasional flicker of a distant house amidst the vast forest. Our return trip from town, where the bars beckoned with their neon allure, took us along the desolate 513 highway. Daniela's urgent need to relieve herself interrupted our journey, her drunken pleas punctuating the quiet of the night. As her distress escalated, mingling with my own burgeoning discomfort, I made the decision to pull over. With Daniela disappearing into the crops on one side of the road and me seeking solace in the woods on the other, Eddie and Michael remained ensconced in their own inebriated revelry. Time stretched on, and the absence of Daniela's return began to gnaw at my nerves. Venturing out once more, I called out into the night, my voice swallowed by the darkness. Reluctantly, I enlisted Michael's reluctant aid, his laughter echoing through the silent night as we plunged into the overgrown crops. The rustling of leaves and the sound of our footsteps merged with the eerie laughter, creating a disconcerting cacophony that set my heart pounding. Amidst the oppressive darkness, a whisper of unease crept over me, halting Michael in his tracks. Straining to pierce the shadows, we pressed onward, guided only by the feeble beam of our flashlight. It was then, in a narrow clearing, that we encountered a figure, a stranger, their features obscured by the dim light. A surge of primal fear propelled me into flight, my feet carrying me back to the safety of the car in a blur of panic. Ignoring Eddie's slumbering form, I sounded the horn, a desperate plea for help echoing into the night. Relief flooded through me as Michael emerged from the darkness, dragging Daniela's unconscious body in his wake. The sight of her battered form sent shockwaves through me, her limp figure a stark reminder of the dangers lurking in the darkness. With trembling hands, we bundled her into the car, my mind reeling with the implications of what had transpired. The drive to the nearest hospital was a blur of panic and confusion, our thoughts consumed by fear for Daniela's well-being. As she lay unconscious, her forehead marred by a vicious wound, Michael's revelation sent shivers down my spine. A shadowy figure lurking in the night, unseen and unknown. In the sterile confines of the hospital, as Daniela drifted in and out of consciousness, the full weight of our ordeal settled upon us. Who was the mysterious assailant, and what dark intentions had led them to prey upon us in the dead of night? In the days that followed, our lives were consumed by fear and uncertainty, the memory of that fateful night casting a long shadow over our once carefree existence. With each passing day, Daniela's recovery became a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, her resilience a testament to the strength of the human spirit. As we grappled with the aftermath of our ordeal, we vowed to never again underestimate the dangers that lurked in the night. Together we would navigate the shadows, united in our determination to emerge stronger, braver, and more resilient than before. For in the darkness, amidst the whispers of fear and uncertainty, we found the strength to stand tall, to confront our deepest fears, and to emerge victorious in the face of adversity. And though the night may hold many secrets, we would face them together, armed with nothing but the light of friendship and the courage of our convictions. Shadow Road wound its way through the countryside, a desolate path cutting through fields and forests alike. It was a road with a reputation, known for its eerie silence and the strange occurrences that seemed to plague those who traveled its lonely stretches. One dark and stormy night, I found myself driving along Shadow Road, the rain pounding against the windshield and the wind howling through the trees. The storm had come out of nowhere, catching me off guard as I made my way home from a late-night shift at work. As I drove, my mind wandered to the stories I had heard about Shadow Road, the tales of ghostly hitchhikers and phantom figures that haunted its darkened lanes. I had always dismissed such stories as mere superstition, the product of overactive imaginations and too many late nights spent on the road. But as I rounded a bend in the road, my headlights illuminated a figure standing by the side of the highway, a woman, her clothes soaked through and her hair plastered to her face by the driving rain. My first instinct was to keep driving, to ignore the stranger and continue on my way. But something about the woman's demeanor gave me pause. There was a sadness in her eyes, a weariness that spoke of a long journey and a heavy burden. Against my better judgment, I pulled over and rolled down the window, the rain beating against the car as I called out to her. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. The woman nodded, her expression grateful as she approached the car. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been walking for hours, and I don't know how much longer I can go on." Without a second thought, I unlocked the door and invited the woman inside, offering her a respite from the storm that raged outside. As she settled into the passenger seat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creeping over me, an irrational fear that I couldn't quite shake. As we drove, the woman told me her story, a tale of loss and heartache, of a love lost and a life left behind. Her words were tinged with sadness, and I found myself drawn to her despite my misgivings. But as we neared the end of Shadow Road, the woman grew quiet, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. I followed her gaze and saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, a man, his features obscured by the darkness as he stared back at us with eyes that seemed to pierce the night. Without warning, the woman let out a scream of terror, her voice echoing through the car as she pointed at the figure in the road. "He's here!" she cried, her hands trembling as she reached for the door handle. In a panic, I slammed on the brakes and brought the car to a screeching halt, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the figure in the road. But when I looked again, the man was gone, vanished into the darkness without a trace. Shaken, but determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I turned to the woman and demanded answers. Who was the man in the road, and why was she so afraid of him? But the woman said nothing, her eyes wide with fear as she stared out into the night. And as I watched, she began to fade away before my eyes, her form dissolving into mist until there was nothing left but the empty seat beside me. In that moment, I knew the truth. The woman was not of this world, but a spirit trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. And as I drove on into the night, the echoes of her scream ringing in my ears, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Shadow Road held, and what horrors awaited those who dared to travel its haunted lanes. At the age of 19, I found myself unexpectedly alone for the weekend. With my mom and older sister out of town, I settled into the familiar routine of solitude in our Georgia home. Saturdays were my sanctuary, a break from the demands of schoolwork, and having the house to myself only sweetened the deal. Little did I know this particular Saturday would etch itself into my memory for years to come. As the clock edged closer to midnight, I lounged on the couch, engrossed in a nature documentary. The tranquil scenes lulled me into a drowsy state, prompting me to step outside for a quick smoke on the front porch with my loyal companion, my bull. Returning indoors, the haze of relaxation was shattered by a chilling realization. The back patio door stood wide open. Panic gripped me as I grappled with the unsettling truth that someone had breached our sanctuary. How had I forgotten to secure the door? How had I missed such an obvious intrusion? With trembling hands, I armed myself with a knife from the kitchen and embarked on a nerve-wracking sweep of the house. Despite my frantic search, there was no sign of the intruder, leaving me questioning my own sanity. Could I have absent-mindedly left the door ajar, only to realize it now in a haze of paranoia? The notion seemed implausible, but in the absence of any other explanation, I was left with no choice but to accept the unsettling reality. Cut off from communication with my depleted phone minutes, I resigned myself to a restless night's sleep. Clutching the knife tightly, I barricaded myself in my bedroom, every creak of the house amplifying my sense of vulnerability. Hours dragged by in agonizing silence until a restless impulse drove me to seek solace in another smoke. Opening my window, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. A truck idling in my driveway, its occupant obscured in the darkness. Heart pounding, I watched in disbelief as they swiftly departed, leaving me to confront the aftermath of their intrusion. Racing outside, I found my worst fears confirmed. Not only had they violated our home, but they'd also plundered it, leaving behind a gaping void where our belongings once stood. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, lingering long after the physical remnants of their presence had vanished. In the aftermath of the ordeal, questions swirled in my mind, unanswered and unsettling. Why had they spared my room? Was it mere chance or something more sinister at play? Even now, decades later, the memory of that night casts a shadow of unease, a reminder of the fragility of security in a world fraught with uncertainty. When I was younger, being home alone was a regular occurrence. Whether my parents were out for a night on the town or traveling for work, I found myself in the quiet company of our empty house more often than not. As an only child, I had mixed emotions about these solitary evenings. On one hand, I relished the freedom to crank up the volume on my Xbox or lose myself in whatever activities caught my fancy. Popcorn and pizza became my culinary companions, with a side of Mountain Dew to fuel my late-night gaming sessions. Call of Duty battles echoed through the house, accompanied by the soundtrack of rock or rap music pumping through the speakers. But amidst the thrill of independence lurked moments of unease. Those solitary nights sometimes felt more ominous than liberating. I'd brush off my creeping sense of anxiety, chalking it up to imagination, or simply being told it was just my nerves acting up. Yet there were times when the fear felt all too real, like an unwelcome guest lurking in the shadows of our home. One frigid evening in 2016 stands out vividly in my memory. The chill of the winter night seeped through the windows as I settled onto the couch, ready to lose myself in a movie. Yet a subtle discomfort gnawed at me, a sensation akin to being watched. Despite reassuring myself that it was merely my overactive imagination, the feeling persisted, refusing to be ignored. Suddenly, a surge of adrenaline jolted through me, prompting an urgent need to double-check the locks on our doors. Despite confirming their security, an unsettling sense of unease lingered. Fed up with my own paranoia, I decided to call it a night, hoping that sleep would offer respite from my racing thoughts. However, sleep proved elusive. In the dead of night, a trip to the bathroom turned into a heart-pounding encounter. The muffled sound of voices outside sent me into a panic. Without hesitation, I donned my snow boots, grabbed my phone, and rushed to the living room, dialing my mother in a frenzy. As I recounted the chilling events unfolding, I made a startling discovery. The front door stood wide open, a glaring invitation to the unknown. Panic surged through me as I secured the door and peered anxiously into the darkness beyond. With my mother's voice offering a lifeline of reassurance on the phone, my father sprang into action, contacting the authorities. Yet when the police arrived, they found no trace of intruders, save for the inexplicable footprints dotting our yard. To this day, the incident remains a haunting mystery, dismissed by skeptical parents and leaving me with a lingering sense of vulnerability. Despite the lack of tangible evidence, the memory of that night continues to linger, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between safety and uncertainty. And while my parents may doubt the validity of my experience, the fear that gripped me that night remains all too real in my mind. At 28 years old, I found myself facing a harrowing ordeal that shattered any illusion of security. With my wife away attending her uncle's funeral, I was left to hold down the fort solo. Money was tight, and the responsibilities of being the primary provider weighed heavily on my shoulders. Our home wasn't completely empty, though. We had our faithful golden retriever, Elsa, and our precious baby boy, Dylan, who was barely a year old at the time. As evening fell, I settled Dylan into bed, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. Yet, as I lay beside Elsa, the familiar ache of anxiety crept in. It wasn't uncommon for me to struggle with sleep when my wife was away, call it overthinking or simply a need for reassurance. But I found solace in knowing she was safe. Despite taking melatonin to ease my restlessness, I found myself jolting awake to chaos. Elsa's frantic barks mingled with the blaring of the fire alarm, and Dylan's cries pierced the night. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to assess the situation. Racing to Dylan's room, I scooped him up and hurried to confront the source of the commotion. The kitchen was engulfed in billowing smoke, flames licking at the ceiling with ferocious intensity. There was no time to hesitate. With Elsa by my side, I ushered Dylan to safety and dialed emergency services. The arrival of the firefighters was swift, but the damage had already been done. Our once peaceful home now lay in ruins, consumed by a blaze that tore through it with merciless speed. Amidst the wreckage, the truth emerged. This was no accident. Forced entry at the garage door bore witness to a deliberate act of arson. Gasoline, maliciously doused throughout the premises, fueled the inferno that ravaged everything in its path. As the flames were subdued, a chilling realization settled in. Someone had targeted us with malicious intent. In the aftermath of the fire, questions lingered like smoldering embers. Who could harbor such hatred towards us? Why were we chosen as victims of this heinous crime? Despite the efforts of law enforcement, the perpetrator remained elusive, their motives shrouded in mystery. We sought refuge with my parents, our shattered sense of security serving as a constant reminder of the trauma we endured. The scars left by that night run deep, a haunting testament to the fragility of safety in an unpredictable world. Yet amidst the ashes, we found strength in each other, determined to rebuild our lives despite the shadows that lingered.